4, 3, 2, 1.
This is episode number 401 of WPwatercooler, reimagining the WordPress media library.
401.
Brought to you by our friends over at WP Site Sync. If you want to learn how to sync content between websites, go over to WPsitesync.com. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me at Jason Tucker on Twitter.
I'm Steve Zehngut. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup.
I'm Say Reed. I make WordPress, preach WordPress, teach WordPress at Say Reed Media on all the things.
And y'all know who it is. It's your boy Jason Cosper, aka Fat Mullenweg, back at it again on the most influential WordPress podcast.
Speaking of which, you can go leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify.
Listen up.
And you can join us over on Discord. Go to WPwatercooler.com/Discord to join us over there. Hi, Discord folks. And we have two guests today.
What?
Fancy.
We have Helen and Joe. Helen, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick. Give us the quick little pitch there.
Oh my God. I'm the director of open source.
I'll have to augment.
I'm the director of open source initiatives at 10up, cool agency, and one of the lead developers for WordPress itself.
Awesome. Good to have you. How about you, Joe? Tell us about yourself, Joe.
I am a dad in St. Louis who plays on computer sometimes. I'm a director of software development at another agency, Alley Interactive, that also does fun things. And a core contributor to the WordPress software project. Primarily, my focus has been media, which is, I think, why you drove me in here.
Yes.
Sorry.
What an excellent segue.
Yes.
I believe Helen brought you here to be incriminated.
Yeah, no, I'm into it.
Yeah. He's here to do what I tell him to do. That's
Please approach the bench.
I want to just reassure you both that today is not about bashing the media library.
Oh, we can.
Right up front.
You can.
Are you sure?
Oh,
I thought we're bashing the current.
Yeah, that was done on the past 400 episodes.
Yeah, we've already done that. We're looking to the future now, which actually we are. I think Cosper, I think you deserve the honor of introducing this very interesting topic, since you are the one who first sent us all Helen's really interesting tweet.
yeah. So The Verge recently wrote this. It was The Verge, right? Wrote this really interesting article about how basically the youth of today, people who were raised on smartphones, tablets, everything else, don't really have a frame of reference for a file system. Basically don't have any way of knowing how to open files, find files. Like they just, everything just lives on their phone. What do you mean? Like, I need to learn how to upload a picture through a web form somewhere. Like it just doesn't make
conventions.
I think I was thinking about this, and it's just because it's kind of like the save button. You know how the save button is a floppy disk, and that's just like this.
They don't even know what that icon.
No, it doesn't make any sense because people don't file anymore. Like files, unless you work in a medical office, but files don't actually, like, that's not a thing.
Right.
So
right.
And then that's totally what the model is. It's based off of, manila folder. That's what the logo, that's what the icon is. So what an interesting problem.
Part of what I was thinking about and part of what I wanted to see how people think about, being presented with issues like this is first of all, how do you relate this back to your work, right? Because I feel like, I don't know, should we just have spicy takes all show? Maybe that's what this will be.
Yeah.
One thing that I find frequently happens within individual communities on the web, right, of which there are many, and WordPress is one of them, is that there's this tendency to only share writing, only share materials that are directly about that area. right? So like the WordPress community, as with any other human community, is prone to that, right? Where we're just always sharing articles that are like talking about WordPress, or this site is using WordPress, or hey, this company badmouthed WordPress, or whatever. And it's like, well, what if, like to me, and maybe this is a part of like being in that lead developer kind of like mindset and role, right? It's like, I'm looking at things that are like not at all about WordPress and thinking about like, how does this apply to usability and how people conceive of the web, how people conceive of using a computer in the first place, right? What is somebody's expectation when they're using the web? Do they know that they're even using the web? I don't know. I mean, the answer to that is actually probably no, they don't, right? And a big part of that is, right. And so one thing that I was thinking about, so this article, like something that's really important to contextualize about it is that the article specifically was actually talking about higher ed STEM students. Right. So, and it's talking about how this is a thing. I don't think that they say this so directly in the article, but this is a thing that's been happening for a long time. Right. They do mention like the move to phones and search-based experiences and all of that. But this is something that I used to teach in my job before 10up. And I have been at 10up for 10 years. It's a really freaking long time. Right. Especially in computer time. That's a really long time. My job before 10up was at a music conservatory, where I had gone. I did my master's there and then stayed on as a web developer. Like, new thing. But one of my responsibilities was teaching a digital portfolio course for music students, right? So this is like, how do you prepare digital materials? How do you package that up into like a press kit type of thing? And then how do you convert those concepts into a website? Because in 2008 to 2011, that was a up and coming thing, right? At that time, having a personal website at that time was like a new concept. And we were teaching that in this class. And one of the absolute hardest things, and one of the things that we had to spend a ton of class time on, was the concept of where do you save your files? How do you, group them together? How do you package them up to be sent somewhere? And what does it mean to upload a file using FTP? Right? Because this is before we refer to anything as the cloud, right? So like getting musicians who sort of like eschew a lot of technology, right, to understand like, what does it mean that my assignment is to upload a photo of myself to this FTP server, right? So like we would host an FTP server internally for them, and their assignment would be to follow our instructions, FTP in, and put their correctly named headshot into a folder, right? Because even then, right, for a certain group who is not Gen Z, these are people who are my age, because I actually graduated young. So these are students who are my age or older.
Millennial.
I'm an older millennial. So my age group / school group is in the mid to late 30s. For context,
we were actually called geriatric millennials. So
geriatric millennials.
But I wanted to clarify.
I don't care. Like whatever.
It makes me a dinosaur.
Young Gen Z.
Yeah. Sometimes like that doesn't matter as much, right? It's like, okay, like for me, the context for me is that I finished grad school in 2008. I finished my master's in 2008, and I have 2 kids. Like I feel like that's probably the more clear description of like where I belong and how things work. So
like you're saying basically that this is not new in terms of like
people struggled. New. People have always struggled, right? And like and like people who didn't grow up with computers, people who did grow up with computers but like only ever used them to, do things that they had to do, right? And never used it for enjoyment, and like never had to organize anything.
Well, I want to touch on real quick. I want to touch on something you said really, really quickly in your description there. It's also the idea of computers has become confusing. You use a term there that I think has become confusing, and that is the cloud, right? This idea of the cloud makes you think that there's no computer, right? It's just my stuff goes up into the sky somewhere, right? And then it magically reappears when I need it. Right. That's how it's described when you watch TV commercials.
Yeah. And that's what they want. They want it to feel like
that's
magical,
right.
Like you don't have to think about it. And there are cool things about that too, right? That's part of that's one of those things that WordPress needs to think about is like, how do you appeal to people as a distributed, self-installed, self-maintained application when the model that people are operating from, including ourselves, is not an age thing, is one of closed ecosystems and bundled apps, right? So how do you function in a mindset that's centered around that?
But I'd also say, I think the age thing is right on, because it really has nothing to do with age. You could argue that this, I mean, you're kind of describing an age that's younger than you, but this also applies to an age group that's older than me, right? Right. So there's kind of a window.
We are the only ones who know.
Right. There's a window of there's sort of a small window age group of people who really get what a file used to be and how it's represented on the computer, and that's it. It's
we
a
both
really
had
small
floppy
window.
disks, and we don't need floppy disks.
Right.
Like, we're cool either way.
Yeah.
The generation that remembers when CDs were new, I think, is
right.
Kind of
We're also the generation that had to like muck our way through like setting up servers and doing all of this like self-installed stuff that like all has sort of been solved. So like we are like the internet generation that is like the equivalent of like the do-it-yourself like computer builders like pre-Mac days, right? Like where it was like, well, why would anybody want their own personal computer? Like, why would you want to just build your own thing? Like, and like, you know, it's just the natural stages of things. And I think for folks that work on WordPress stuff and WordPress itself, like one of the biggest challenges to solving problems like how do you make the media library more powerful is, we're not building software that has a consistent, scalable sort of like back end that, we can rely on. Like we're building software that it has to work for, people who are installing it on, the $5 a month, hosting plan, and they just want to like throw up their vacation pics and like, it's going to be great. And like the kind of projects that like Helen and I work on, which, through our agency space, which is like
the White House.
Massive, right?
The White House is a small site relative to a lot of the stuff we're working on.
But these sites that are, powered by like these massive backends that could do so much more. And how do you build software on top of that like you don't make the experience require so much tech that, the consumer at the lower end can't use the stuff. And at the high end, it's flexible enough to do what they need. And that's a hard problem.
And to add to that, Joe, you need software that is, and you kind of said this, but that is hardware agnostic, right? Because if somebody installs a plugin that maybe connects WordPress up to AWS, right? Now you have a whole different stack that you're dealing with, and the front end still has to accommodate that.
Yeah. And exactly. A lot of the people who then are like doing the actual editorial content work, right, don't need to care about that.
Right.
And sometimes like we expose too many of those details, and it's like that's really terrifying stuff.
Yeah,
I don't need to know that.
That's why people get freaked out about WordPress, because there's this other area that they want to compartmentalize, and the software tends to not compartmentalize.
Yes,
I think. I think that I think it would be great if you and the leadership, you, Joe, specifically, if you guys were just like, well, we never really did anything with the file structure of the media library because we knew that as our computers aged, file structures were old-fashioned, and so we were just waiting for. Yeah, you're just actually cutting edge.
Let's go with that.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good way to look at it.
I was actually talking to somebody at TEDup about this morning, just a couple hours ago. Which is what I went through recently to find a photo of something. I think that what I was looking for was a photo of a sandwich, right? And so, like
was
shocker.
it a hot dog? Is it kind of a sandwich? I
don't know. So to bring up a few things. So in services like Google Photos, your iCloud Photos, right? These hosted things that we are all using at this point because of our phones. They're just like a part of our phones, right? They're connected to these centralized services. And through that, we're able to plain text search photos.
Right.
But not perfectly. It's imperfect.
Hey,
right? So
wait,
like I go on my phone.
My sister-in-law is one of the leads on the Google Photos team, so I can't say that it's not perfect. I just want you to know. Google Photos is flawless and the perfect software. Okay, anyway.
Google Photos does a terrifyingly good job of face recognition and grouping in photos. I will give it that.
And if you type sandwich into it, it will find
it'll find them. So I did it on my phone. So I use an iPhone. And it gave me a bunch of photos of sandwiches, but not the one that I was looking for that I knew was in there somewhere. Cause like, I don't delete stuff. I am one of those users who just like doesn't clean up because everything's just there in the pile. And so to find the thing in the pile, you search for the thing in the pile, right? There's no like idea of time. There's no idea of anything else. You can now like hand enter captions for photos if you want to. Right? It's like the equivalent of like writing on the back of a photo after you've taken it, right? So you can do that now on your phone. Yeah, like I have a photo behind me that I'm fairly certain that this photo has like a date written on the back of it, right? Like, you know, we come from that era, but you can do that now on your phone and that makes it more searchable, but it also does like some of that image recognition. But I couldn't find it on my phone. And what I ended up doing was that I knew it was something that I had posted to Instagram, and my personal website consumes all of my stuff from Instagram back over into my personal website. And my personal website, Shill Alert, runs a plugin that I am a part of maintaining called Classify, which connects you to cloud AI ML services. And what we do in that case is if you have an account with something like Azure, you can connect your WordPress site to that service and opt into sending your images off to be categorized, tagged, alt text generated, all of that stuff. And so I ended up going into my site and searching sandwich in the media library, and that's where I found it. And then from there,
Helen, you went to your media library to find.
I went to the media library, and it was useful.
Just like on the floor right now.
It can be useful, and so I found the thing. Yeah, I found the thing. Wow. Found the date that it was from, and then on my computer in my Dropbox was able to navigate to the year month folder that it had gotten organized into in order to get the original. Right? So
I feel
to see the picture of the sandwich because it's kind of like
I feel like we have to see the sandwich.
I need to see the sandwich.
Let's see. I don't even have
my sandwich should be the new boat.
While you're searching for this, there was
the hero's journey all the way through.
While you're searching for this, there was a Silicon Valley episode about this exact thing. They created an app called Hot Dog Not Hot Dog that just identified hot dogs. That's all it did.
Because that leg thing. So you just not to get too distracted by the sandwich, though I am totally distracted by the picture of the sandwich. But you kind of just dropped it in there, and I know you're not trying to shill a product like you said or anything, but I was not aware of this product, and so basically what you're saying is that is a plugin that you can then use to basically AI search your photos on your media librry. Right?
Yes. So it actually started, I can give you a little background about it. So it actually started on a project where, when we were talking about like the kind of massive content sites that we at our agencies deal with, I know Allie, does a ton of things with big publishers, right? That's like Allie's bread and butter. And so we were working on like one of those long-time publishers that had brought over many, many years of things into WordPress, and they needed to update all their tags. And we were like, oh my God, this is not a thing where we can like manually retag all these things, right? And so one of our engineers used IBM Watson in that case to do what's called natural language processing. And that allowed them to kind of automatically tag everything and then go through a review process, which is much faster than actually doing the tags yourself, right? So it actually started out as a language processing plugin. And so we open sourced that component of it. And then from there, we were like, okay, what would actually make this plugin like useful to the masses, right? What's something that actually
focal point cropping just for the
focal point cropping is very new, but actually very important. Something that I've dealt with many times on projects.
All the plugins I've ever used for it do not work.
You don't have to use my eyes are up here anymore.
Yeah. So it's one of those. I mean, it does come with a caveat that this is sending stuff off to Azure for the
it's literally everything on our phones now. So.
Correct. Yes, it's about being educated about what your trade-off is, right?
Right.
But yeah, so we were like, okay, actually, we think that images are actually the high impact thing to work on, right? So in your product mindset, right? Like, what is the high impact thing, right? And how do we break that high impact thing down into specific feature areas that we can work on, and how do we prioritize those things? And so we thought, okay, so you have image processing. We went with Azure. Part of it is that we were already familiar with Azure because we do a lot of work on their blob storage plugin as well, which is a separate thing, just like as a client. But you're like, okay, so let's take a look at all the different offerings. Actually, I have this huge document that goes through like AWS recognition, Azure's image recognition, maybe the GCP one, or like whatever it was, right? So it's this big document that I had, and we were like, okay, let's take a look at what all these different things these cloud services are offering, right? Again, what are the things that a hosted centralized system can offer that something like WordPress cannot offer on its own, right? So let's take a look at these things, and then what are the things that are high impact, right? So let's start by matching the content tagging, right, from the language processing part, right? So feature parity, we started there, right? And that also allowed us to make sure that we know how to send the images off to the API and get a result back, and how do you store it? And what we learned through that by doing that feature parity is that in the media library in particular, how are you searching for stuff, right? How are you filtering stuff down? And it's not that like you don't want a drop down with like 1,000 different tags in it, right? And then you're like scrolling through a bajillion tags, trying to remember what that tag might even be.
There are some developers who would think, oh, let's put a drop down.
Yeah, it's a list of data, and the media library already has a category drop down, you know, or it already has a date drop. It doesn't have a category drop down. Right. It already has a date drop down, or a file type-ish drop down, which I want to talk about. And so like we should just make a drop down because it matches the UI. But that's a lot of the thought process, and I get it, right? Like there's been so much hammering on the like make everything match the WordPress admin, and it's like, okay, but matching is not the same as like copying wholesale. But for humans, when you think about what humans are doing today, they want to search, right? So what we ended up having to do on it right. But from a technical perspective, that meant that we were storing the return tags and all that stuff in a taxonomy, right? Because it's like, it's performant and it's like the correct data structure and whatever. But you know what we also do is we also store that into post meta on the attachment. And we have that search, we filter that the media library search to include post meta, which is non-performant, but because it's only in your back end, right? Like the benefit of that as compared to
back end, and it doesn't matter. That's my philosophy for sure.
Okay.
And just what you know that.
Yes, but you know, like again, being educated about what the trade-off is. We know that it's going to be slow, and for some sites, this is not going to be a good idea, right? But for a consumer site like mine, it's fine. I'm just going to do the search and just let it take a little bit longer than it used to from a human perspective, and I'll be fine, right? So now the search in the media library in the admin allows you to plain text search all these tags. And then from there we added.
Not the core media library, the media library with this plugin on top of it.
No, it's the core media library.
Wait, so the core media library allows you to plain text search your post meta tags?
The tags, the automated tags and alt text on images in your media library.
With this I think you've got to filter the queries to make that work, but yeah.
Yes, it is a very nasty
I was like,
string filter.
I can type in the file name and it finds it. That's about it. That's all I'm getting right now.
Yeah, you have to remember
that's how correct.
Image
okay.
472 or image 475, you know.
so just
I want to know how this okay, go ahead.
How does it work? Okay, so
I want to know how can we so search has legendarily been a weak point in WordPress, right? Like we can all agree to that, I'm sure, right? That's why there's multiple plugins that are like Relevancy or whatever that one is.
Search in the admin panel or search on the front end?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, but I mean, we're talking about the back end, but whatever. Both and either. So if we're relying on search and really translating that, and you're saying this is part of that now, can you talk to how this is going to be? Is this or besides Jetpack or WordPress.com hosting its own AI, which now that you're describing it, I'm like, oh, so that's going to be Jetpack soon. But other than that, like, is there like what parts of that can be incorporated into core without being one of those things that is like, oh, that's too specific a use case, so it needs to be in a separate plugin? Like, are components of this, because that is how people use it through search. So how is that getting applied in the media library itself, in the core media library?
Right. So I think there are two totally separate things that Helen and I like talk about when we've talked about these problems. One of which being like the actual data structure that we use to like store all of this data so that we can access it easily. And then the other being like, what does the user actually see? You know, what are they interacting with? And I think oftentimes people sort of get in this like one-to-one mindset where it's like, oh, I want to be able to see this organization of my library in something like folders or something like, you know, what you're used to seeing in, you know, Google Photos or other sorts of experiences where you can say like, I don't know, show me all my images by date, show me all my images by location. You know, we have all of that data on photos in your WordPress library. There are some of that data that we intentionally do not base, you know, certain product decisions on because of privacy concerns and that sort of thing. Like you don't want to surface location data of everybody's photos, you know, without it being sort of an opt-in thing. Like that's stuff that we think about.
Yeah.
But like a great example is, Jason, you mentioned like you're able to search and find your file by file name. That was not possible until WordPress 4.7, when I think Helen, was that one of your releases that you led? I know you and I have like worked on this together.
I think that was a Scott Taylor special that we led.
Was that the, yeah.
I mean, the fact that wasn't possible until 4.7 is amazing.
It's mind-boggling, right? Like
it's mind-boggling.
You can search by like title, whatever the it was titled because it's a post underneath. You know.
Yeah, it's the post title and post content is what you're able to search by. But post content is a very weird concept in a media library.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that file name is stored in post meta. So we had to like add like a search for post meta to make that work. Post meta is not a performant thing to search against when you're searching for values.
No.
And
that's going to take a long time.
Yeah. No. So like, and you can see like on the ticket where we worked on this, you like people who have big media libraries, they're like just to do a search for something in their media library, like went from like 2 seconds to like 20 seconds. And if you're working with media all the time, like that's one of the trade-off challenges that I was talking about earlier is like, if we're building for folks who are, you know, on just like normal consumer level sort of like hosting packages, like we have to pay attention to that, and we can't make things, you know, we basically added a filter so that people that have lots of media in their libraries can turn that off so that they're, you know, they're not searching by file name, but like their searches don't take forever. So really like the ways that we would fix this in the actual product, besides having something like, some other, third-party companies that, allow us to use some sort of like back end that's shared across like the organization or something, is to build to like make sure we're using structures that work well, whether it be, taxonomies that are created in a good way, or, improve the way that, possibly even like making media a first class like object type in WordPress, the same way that like posts and users and other things are, where we could like really like normalize the data in a way that's more searchable. It's hard.
That's what I was going to say, Joe. I mean, that's part of the kind of the big issue with WordPress is everything is dumped into post meta.
Yeah.
Not just images. Everything is dumped into post meta. It's not indexed, and that's the Achilles heel of the database, right?
But Steve, that's the WordPress way.
It doesn't. I don't know that it has to be, right? That's a really good sandwich. Thank you.
That
Gotta make sure that the op delivers. You know.
At some point that needs to change if WordPress is really going to, if these things are going to grow, right? Because that really is the thing that's holding you back from making a truly indexable, searchable media library. Yep. And that's it. Because you're limited. You're just limited.
Is there in the roadmap, and let's say 6.0 roadmap, like it doesn't have to be a soon coming up releases, but is there an idea of integrating some of that AI functionality that's in Google Photos or in some of the Classify plugin that she was talking about, Helen was talking about? Is that even on the horizon for something like WordPress or for the core library?
I would think we would do that.
I think it's just not possible, right? Like the closest you're ever going to get to something like that in a distributed fashion, right, in a non-hosted service fashion, is if you're doing something completely wild, like you are shipping some kind of ML model and also training some open source library like TensorFlow on your own media library, which means it's only getting its understanding from
your stuff,
what we've used so far.
Right.
And that has to be a subset. And then because of, open tenants and that kind of stuff, then we would only want to train it on certain images under certain licensing and, blah, blah, blah. Right. And,
right.
And then that's if you could even do that, right? If you could even distribute something like that. But if you could, that's not going to run on
that's
any hosted, any shared hosting ever.
Right.
So basically, we can't look forward to AI, but maybe someday we'll get ourselves out of the post-meta hole.
But like Joe said, I mean, you're always building to some sort of lowest common denominator server when you're in a distributed environment. That is a limitation.
Yeah, and I think what you said about Jetpack, for better or worse, however people might feel about it, that is the best positioned place to have something like that.
Right, because it's got a SaaS behind it.
Well, and it already has, it already does, the CDN functionality and all of that. It already has.
They're already slurping up your stuff.
They're already getting your stuff, so it wouldn't really matter. I would assume then that something like this would appear first maybe on WordPress.com since it is monetized, then on .org. But it's fun to think about the future possibilities that AI, which is really advancing in a lot of our industry, that it could at some point trickle down into something like the media library. That makes me happy.
Yep.
Now I'm
look at the time.
I know this could be a 4-part topic.
Oh man, I want to say thank you for
let the affiliates know we're running long. It's fine.
Let the affiliates know. Well, hey, I want to say thank you very much for both of you, Helen, as well as Joe. I really appreciate having you on here. When we get to the point where we're getting closer and closer to this sort of stuff, or you start coming up with better solutions for us to be able to roll out these sorts of things, I would love to have you folks come back, because like we talked about and have joked about for the last 400 episodes, the media library needs some help, and it needs it in a big way. And I'll literally install anything that will make it a teeny bit better. And we've tried them all, and I haven't tried this one yet, so I'm gonna have to give this a shot and see how it goes. Thank you very much.
Joe,
here's our outro.
Joe, if you want to come back for a trash session, we can absolutely do that.
My calendar's clear. Let's go.
Yes.
Here's my feature request for 5.9, Joe. Can we add file type filtering to that drop down? Because right now it's just images, audio, video, but could we at least have JPEG, GIF, PNG?
That would be awesome.
There are so many things that I would love to see done.
But can I just have this one small thing? What if I just commit it myself? I'm not even going to ask.
She just wants to sort her PDFs from her JPEGs. Come on.
You heard here on the water cooler first.
Do it.
Yep. All right, guys. Talk to y'all later.
We gotta go.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this content, you should subscribe to this content. Go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and you can even listen and watch us on YouTube. Talk to y'all later. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna go make myself a bacon and cheese
Sandwich.